Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast. Today's episode is Having Human Expectations of Humans is Healthier. A reminder that nothing in any of our episodes should be considered medical advice.
Our intention for today's episode is to invite you to check in with your expectations of yourself and others, to see where expectations might be unrealistic, which in turn could be causing undue suffering.
We hope you'll discover a concept of the manual, and that having a manual for yourself and perhaps your colleagues and your loved ones can get you into trouble. And we hope that you'll see where not having human expectations of yourself and others in manuals has a high cost.
We hope that your takeaways will include that checking in with expectations of self and others can be helpful in self-care. This helps us remind us of the common humanity that exists, that we are all perfectly imperfect. It's also a powerful act of self-compassion. So Jessie, will you tell us about the inspiration for today's episode?
So this episode came actually from two things. A few episodes ago, we talked about dropping the cape as part of the Mindful MD think tank about physician burnout. And this idea of having a cape comes with it a lot of unrealistic expectations of physicians beyond being human and beyond being fallible. But when I thought about it more, I came to realize that we actually all carry a lot of expectations of ourselves that aren't human and aren't healthy as parents and as friends and as colleagues and just sort of in our lives. And so it goes beyond just the role of working in medicine, and that many people in the world have expectations of themselves that are perhaps not human. And what I mean by that is perfectionism, for example. Humans are, as you mentioned, perfectly imperfect. And yet many of us aspire to be perfect. We also aspire to not make mistakes. And of course, we don't want to make mistakes, but humans make mistakes. That's why we're not robots. And so when we make mistakes or we're not perfect, we go into these shame, blame, and guilt cycles that cause a lot of harm. And so humans, if we have human expectations of ourselves, that's where we bring in the compassion and acceptance of our humanity. And we allow for limitations. We also allow for our uniqueness and our differences. And so when I started to really think about this, I wrote a bit more about it. And what I discovered when I shared what I wrote in one of my blogs, and any of you are welcome to go sign up for my blog or read the blog on dropping the cape after you listen to this episode, but that it really resonated with people. So I got a lot of emails back about people's comments about their thoughts on it, what it brought up, what it triggered, where they saw that they were having not human expectations of themselves, and the harm that they saw it either causing themselves and potentially their loved ones. And so one of the things that having not human expectations of ourselves does is it causes harm. And I think as physicians, and many of our listeners are physicians, we took an oath to do no harm, but we do harm to ourselves. And so I always like to bring that up, that notice that treating yourself as something other than human when you are a human, or asking yourself to do things that are not necessarily human, can cause harm. And so one of our first episodes, I don't remember if it's episode 4 or 5, we talk about ahimsa and the idea of doing no harm. And I encourage anyone who's not listened to that episode to go back after listening to this episode and perhaps re-listen to it. And I wanted to reflect too that this idea of inhuman, I don't mean, climbing mountains or jumping out of airplanes. What I think is we get into these ideas of more is better, and that humans are messy. Humans have temper tantrums. Even adult humans have temper tantrums. They just look different than toddler temper tantrums. And humans get hangry, and humans need sleep, and humans need to use the restroom, and humans need breaks, and humans need vacations, though maybe if they live lives that are more human, they wouldn't need as many vacations. But I think our world today has really taken the human condition and tried, we often try to force ourselves, perform more, do more, the harder is better, push yourself. And humans are all different and have different strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes that isn't necessarily better. And so I just wanted to bring up this idea that human expectations of humans is healthy. And I think when we use the word healthy, it takes the edge of judgment out of it. And so a tool in coaching that we've talked about a few times before is this idea of a manual. And a manual is something that we talk about in relationship coaching, and we have manuals for other people. So as I look at Ni Chang as we're recording, right, we have a manual for our podcast co-host and about how she should show up. We have manuals for our spouses and how they should show up. We have manuals for our coworkers and how they should show up. Many of us who work in medicine, we have manuals for how a medical system or how a leader or how a chief should treat you. And so your manual is your expectation or your set of rules about what you think things are supposed to be like. But we also, interestingly, have manuals for ourselves. And some of the most powerful work that I do in coaching is having people figure out what their manual for themselves is. And many people who are, especially women who are moms, have manuals for themselves that are not possible to achieve in 24 hours a day. They are not human manuals. And many things in people's manuals are making everyone happy and fixing and controlling everything and managing everything and taking care of everything. And so realizing that it's really important to look at what your manual for yourself is and what your expectations for yourself are, and making sure that those are healthy for you, given your own limitations. And so to realize that I actually think doing the whole exercise about what your manual is. What do you think you are supposed to do? What do you think you are not supposed to do? Why do you think you're supposed to do those things? And people who coach with me, I actually have a whole sort of way of exploring it. And it is, again, when you start to see these expectations of yourself that are pretty unconscious, you can then decide which of them you want to keep. And so when you blend that with work on your priorities and what your life priorities are, that's where you start living the life that's most meaningful to you, and you start spending your time and your energy on what matters most.
I wanted to reflect upon the manual that many of us have about ourselves, and also the ones that our senior residents and attending physicians in the culture of medicine had for us as trainees. I remember being told by senior residents to pee when I could, to eat when I could, to sleep when I could. And basically that was an explicit statement of putting someone else's needs above that of my own. When in actuality, if we ate, peed, and slept when we needed to, that would have been all the more healthy for us and for our patients and for our caregiving team. So we don't have to buy into the manuals that others have for us either. And oftentimes that's where it's so important to notice when that occurs, especially in establishing, quote unquote, a culture of how things are done, and not being afraid to go outside of cultural norms to establish new cultural norms that are fruitful for self-care and help set us up for success in life and to foster well-being.
Well, we often adopt the manuals of others, and or it may not be a whole manual, but we often adopt the thoughts that others have. And when we adopt their thoughts, if you think about the coaching model, which we haven't talked that much about on the podcast, but when you adopt other people's thoughts, you also get their results in life and like their life experience. And so realizing perhaps when you look at your manual, what if those thoughts are your own? Are they the thoughts that you actually truly believe about yourself and what makes a good life? Or are they thoughts that you've heard other people say so much that you believed that they were your own? And I would offer too that we adopt other people's thoughts because human nature is to want to belong. And so to stand up and to say that we think differently can actually, in medical training, be dangerous. And so when we get to the end is the part where we can perhaps begin to start to step into our own thinking. But I think many of us don't realize, and it's 10, 15 years down the line, and now we're bitter and resentful because we've been living according to other people's manuals for a long time. And so what I would offer here is create a manual for yourself that is, number one, human, and number two, yours. Because I think there isn't enough time in life, and here use the time scarcity for you, but there's not enough time in life to do everything. So choose the things that matter most to you and create a very specific, beautiful manual for a life well lived that's your own life. And that really gets at, we've talked about this a couple of times, your own values and your own priorities and what's most important to you. So some of you will want to spend time at home hanging out with your children. Some of you will want to be giving talks and be on a national stage. All of us are different and have different ideas of what makes us happy. And so the encouragement is, as a human, is to really follow your heart. And so doing what you love and doing what you're good at and doing what you're capable of as a human. And every human is very different in that. One other thing that feels really important to bring up here as we're talking about human expectations of humans being healthy is that I work with a lot of women who are surgeons and ER doctors. And in those professions, a lot of people don't want to be human. The idea of being human feels very scary because humans do make mistakes and humans are not perfect. And sometimes in those professions, those things cost lives. And so there's a lot of fear around allowing yourselves to be human and a lot of shame about being a human, and yet we are human. And so first of all, just deep compassion for the challenge of doing such important work where lives are at stake. And also compassion for the fact that we are humans doing that work. And so when we can actually accept our humanity and accept our fallibility, and that is really the greatest gift we can give ourselves as physicians and humans and caregivers, and also as patients. I think ultimately we will all be patients someday to those who are caring for us, that healing and being physicians is a human profession and we are not robots, because I think it's one of the things that those two professions also have some of the highest burnout. And that is absolutely part of it. This expectation that you are almost superhuman. And so compassion for the people doing that work and compassion for the fact that being human is messy and hard and fallible. But then when we show ourselves compassion and we show ourselves acceptance, it is 1,000% healthier. And if we look at how to avoid things like physician suicide and many, many people leaving medicine right now, it's really having human expectations of ourselves and treating ourselves in healthy ways.
I wanted to share most recently a circumstance where I did have human expectations of myself, basically giving permission to myself to have a real birthday, one that was in alignment with how I was feeling at the time, as opposed to succumbing to the expectations of a birthday in happiness, in celebrating, in basically painting the day in an overly positive light when my own lived reality was not necessarily so positive. So basically, I was having a couple of days of tumultuous spinning with heightened anxiety surrounding some of my own parenting struggles with my soon to be teenager. And so rather than shame or suppress my uncomfortable emotions, that really peaked actually on my birthday, I had human connections already set up that day that I gave myself permission with the sister friends that I was sharing the day with to basically simply be vulnerable and to share and to commiserate and cry even. And I was crying on a hike. I dropped my own expectations to be unaffected. I dropped my own expectations to be, quote unquote, a perfect parent or a person that was going to be unaffected by what my 12-year-old was going through and how that was bringing up a lot of my own traumas from childhood. But the sharing in my difficulty and having listening ears and commiseration was frankly super cathartic and therefore very therapeutic. And so all this to say in that you can give yourself permission to have human expectations of yourself. That is perhaps one of the most self-compassionate things that you can do. And the benefits go beyond that of self. It can impact everyone around you, your family, your loved ones, your patients, and others that you're caregiving for.
What comes to mind hearing that story is that human expectations of humans is not only healthy, it's healing. And that when we show up vulnerable and modeling human expectations of ourselves, and being human is to commiserate and cry at certain times, because crying is human, that just spreads the ripple effect that we often talk about. When we give ourselves permission, it gives other people permission to be human as well. And what a beautiful birthday gift to yourself and to those who spend the day with you. And now to everyone who's listening, that humans cry and that humans struggle. And I think we make the human struggle a problem. And so many people think that, well, I'm struggling, so there's something wrong or I'm broken and something needs to be fixed. And my thought is that we all struggle. Nothing's wrong and nothing's broken. Human struggling is part of being human. It doesn't mean that we don't learn tools to help lessen the struggle and ease the struggle. I consider the tools that we talk about here and that I teach in coaching are really the tools to take away the struggle about the struggle. Okay. And or maybe get rid of the unnecessary struggle, but the inherent struggle in being human is part of being human and is there for all of us. But it's where we judge ourselves and don't give ourselves permission to be human and shame ourselves and shame others. And so showing up with compassion for the human struggle and accepting the human struggle, that's where the beauty shows up. And so what a beautiful birthday gift to yourself and story to share with the world.
Thank you, Jessie. And also that mindfulness helps with dropping the judgment as well. It's a process. We are fine-tuned to judge, but that judging, especially the self-critical judging that many of us have at baseline, doesn't necessarily serve.
Well, and as we talk about mindfulness is noticing. So mindfulness is noticing where you don't have human expectations of yourself and where you're judging yourself for being human or struggling or being imperfect, and where you are judging others for doing the same. And so it's that noticing and non-judgment that we talk about, and also non-striving, because I think we can strive as humans, but striving to be something beyond human or a perfect human, which is not human by definition, is something that can cause harm to ourselves and to others. And the pediatrician and Mom and Me says also that when we model that's what our children learn. And that's what the next generation expects. And so if we want to raise happy and healthy and resilient children, one of the most important things we can do is model being human and being okay being human and being okay struggling and being vulnerable with grace and compassion, elegantly vulnerable.
So here's to being human.
Yeah.
As always, we like to close our podcast with some reflection questions. Where might you recalibrate expectations of yourself and others so that they and you are humanized?
Where do you need to have more human expectations of yourself to optimize your own health? And even more importantly, your own healing? Where might you stop harming yourself with non-human expectations of yourself?
If you haven't already, please join us at the Mindful Healthcare Collective Facebook group or our website at mindfulhealthcarecollective.com. If you enjoyed this podcast or any other episodes, please share broadly, leave us stars and reviews. This helps us reach others. And
this podcast is for humans, all humans. And so we call it the Mindful Healers Podcast. And we have actually been reflecting on this, like, who is it for? It's for every human who struggles with being human, and every human who needs healing and advice from healers who have been there and done a lot of work on finding ways that help us all heal and live a happier, healthier life.
So as a human, please share this podcast episode with other humans, regardless of who
those around. We would also love it if you shared our retreats far and wide, and the Mindful Healers Connect in Nature retreat is actually open for registration for next July already for those early planners who want to take advantage of early bird registration. It's discounted until Halloween, October 31st, for those people who want to plan ahead and make it happen. The dates are July 14th to 16th, 2023. I would also love to have any of you join me at my Sagrada retreat, which has a lot more coaching and a lot more yoga. So if that appeals, please join me there. Or if any of you are up for a just one-day retreat in the Bay Area, I would love to see you at Pie Ranch to honor diastole. And as I mentioned many times in today's podcast, the benefits of coaching are amazing in helping you be the best human that you can be, and to really change your expectations of yourself to be very healthy, human, healing expectations so that you can live your best, happiest, healthiest, most resilient, amazing life. And so I would love to share coaching with you, either one-on-one or small group coaching. I do groups for women. I do groups on relationships. I do groups on parenting. I do groups on transitions. And one of the reasons that I still continue to coach on everything is because, above all, we're all human. And the issues that come up in all of those areas ultimately relate to us being humans and managing the human mind, which sometimes gets in our way.
Stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. Welcome to the mindful moment offering. This mindful moment is going to be somewhat playful and whimsical, and I invite you to just be open to the experience and give yourself permission to laugh at yourself for whatever experience arises. So I'm going to invite you to rub your tummy and pat your head. And we'll do this for a few moments. And as we're doing this, I invite you to notice what's arising for you. Is there some judgment, maybe some discomfort about how you're doing this, why you're doing this? how well you are or are not doing this. And maybe any discomfort that's arising because you're doing two things at the same time and maybe not that well. And so now I would invite you to pause on rubbing your stomach and simply just patting your head. And noticing how this experience is for you, where you're dropping the expectation about having to rub your tummy at the same time. You're giving yourself permission to simply just focus on one task at a time. How this experience is different than you having to rub your tummy and pat your head at the same time. And as you're ready, bringing your arm from patting your head down, and now simply rubbing your tummy and seeing how this experience is compared to when you had to do both. And maybe we can give ourselves more opportunities to drop our expectations, to drop our own manuals of what we should be able to do, to give ourselves permission to do what might be more comfortable, to do what might be more easeful. And as you're ready, bringing the other hand down from the belly, perhaps closing eyes if your eyes weren't already closed before. And taking a moment to notice what's arising for you now after that guided practice, without any judgment. And as you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting your light come back in. Thank you so much for practicing with me.